Hello, my friend, and welcome. This is your moment. I'm Katarina Miletic, and you are listening to the podcast that will challenge you to think with your soul and believe that your only power is inside you. Hello, hello.
Howdy.
Hi.
I'm excited to chat.
I am interested to find out, genuinely interested to find out more about you. And the audience that follows this podcast consists, as I told you, of creative entrepreneurs, of people who are contemplating entrepreneurship, or they have taken those first few steps, towards becoming an entrepreneur and everything that entails. So it requires us to be creative. It requires us to want to be naturally following this instinct to grow and expand, right? So it just, I think it's the most natural journey to follow in life, to be an entrepreneur. Shall we start with that?
Sure.
When did you contemplate becoming entrepreneur, or did you always know inside you?
That's a great question. I think before I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, I was already doing it. The first business I started, I was like 7 or 8, and I started making cookies and selling them around in our neighborhood, and that kind of grew into a baking business. I had a roster of about 30 or 40 customers that I would call every week, and I made bread, cinnamon rolls. I grew up homeschooled, so that was how my mom taught us how to do things. We would have to, go grocery shopping to replace inventory. I had to keep a ledger of all my expenses, and I had to keep like a petty cash bag to give people change. So ever since I was young, I kind of learned the very basics of checking in with people, finding out what they needed, and then showing up and serving them. So I've always had some entrepreneurial endeavor in some sense. I tried being a professional magician for a year and did like corporate events and birthday parties. And then, just of most of my career, I've done a lot of freelance work in media. So working with other people, just being very, very good about listening about what is it people are looking for, what is it that they are needing, and what kind of problems might I be able to help them solve, has been something that I've always been interested in. I launched a partnership with a friend of mine. We started a community consulting business. And so that was kind of my first endeavor with like a legal entity that wasn't just a sole proprietorship. It wasn't just me doing a few things here or there. So it's been a very intense learning process and expansion. Like you mentioned, it's very, very much taught me a lot about what I choose to be responsible for, becoming an extension of me, and having to treat that part of my life as something else that I need to care for, just like I would exercise and take care of my body, or like give my kids and my wife attention. Like that becomes a part of you that you need to care for as well. And so it's been a very humbling and exciting experience.
It's lovely. And thank you for summing it up so well. I mean, that turned out to be a huge question and an even bigger answer, because it involves all parts of us, right? When we choose to be an entrepreneur. What do you think, if you're up for it? Shall we try and deconstruct it a bit and make maybe a list of things that as entrepreneur or someone who is considering to become one, the list of things that I'm trying to avoid the word required, but the list of things that will call upon us to give our best. Let's start that list with our creative abilities, with the vision, with just being able to feel for more than we are.
What are some of the reasons that might draw you, or that your soul might feel called to entrepreneurship from like the creator's lens?
Like what involves? It involves us to have the business sense, list of those things that are necessary to have and to use as an entrepreneur, right?
Oh, okay. So what's involved in being an entrepreneur? What are the core
Yes.
principles?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. And one of my favorite ways to answer that, a book that really excited me about seriously pursuing entrepreneurship is called Starting from Zero. And it's written by he is now a friend of mine. His name's Dane Maxwell. And we have some very similar backgrounds. I've recently found out that he grew up homeschooled. He's a musician. We have very similar life trajectories. And when I read his book, it spoke to me on like such a deep level. And it really helped me understand that it was a path that could satisfy some of the things that my ego and like my personality were looking for. But he described the entrepreneurship journey as being a very simple as having to build the skill set of understanding who your customer is, what is their pain, like what kind of problem are people telling you that they need, what is the market saying is something that's not solved yet, or that they don't have access to a solution yet.
So it's the connection between our own talents, abilities, affinities, and the group of people who has that particular, let's call it a problem, for lack of a better word, because it's a challenge, it's an assignment that we are here to fulfill. So maybe that's the more closer to truth, you know?
Right. Yeah, they have a challenge. They have, there's some gap in where they would like to be and where they are now. And the skill of entrepreneurship is just recognizing that gap. And so he calls that the problem. And then for you as the entrepreneur to come up with a solution. And so as a creative, for somebody who likes to solve problems, who likes to be helpful, you might be the solution. You might have a skill set that you can offer as a service. Or if you're just a highly creative person and somebody who likes the challenge of taking on responsibility, you can outsource. You can just say, I'll figure out how to do that for you if you want to pay me. And then once they give you money, you have to go figure out how to fulfill that. And so you go find somebody who's good at that and you negotiate a deal and you connect them, but you find a way to get them what they need. And then you make them an offer, which is, here's how I propose solving this problem. Here's how I would like to be paid. And so then if you can successfully negotiate an offer, you're an entrepreneur. So you just need to find a customer who has a problem, come up with a solution, and then make an offer. That's the core skill set of being an entrepreneur. And like I tend to identify and speak a lot to other people who identify as being heart-centered, who are very driven by relationship, who are very driven by connection. And people who have that heart-centeredness tend to be very able to become entrepreneurs. Now, it does involve learning that skill set, but the thing that is most required being an entrepreneur, which is listening, being actively paying attention to what people need, because they may say something like, oh man, I really need a vacation, when really what they might be saying is, I don't like the job that I'm in. They might be saying, my family is going through a hard time, I need some rest. They might be saying, I've never traveled, I would love to see the world. Like, they might actually be saying something different than they articulate. And being an entrepreneur is about listening through the symbology of what they're saying to what they really mean, and being able to do that work for them and translate their feelings from language, from experience, from what you know about them, from really truly understanding what the market desires, and then saying, I'll help you get there. I will be willing to work with you, to walk with you in the journey, to help you achieve something you haven't done on your own yet. To be a good entrepreneur, I believe you have to have a high degree of empathy and learn how to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, so that you can imagine, like, what is it that they truly are looking for and wanting, and then be willing to help them get that in a way that helps them.
I always say we can really be of little service if we don't care, truly care to help someone, and help them in a way that we can draw them deeper inside themselves, where these answers and these real issues are. Right?
Mm-hmm.
When they understand themselves on that deeper level, they can then connect the pieces. So perhaps we are a catalyst for them. We just help them reignite that spark, or we help them water that seed,
Mm-hmm.
but the seed is already there. It's like it doesn't come from us. It is already there. So we just can help them to complete that picture into a full being. I love where it took us. That's not where I what I was thinking when we first started with this particular question. But that's what happens when two artists speak. You're an award-winning composer, so I want to hear more about that, because having these natural abilities and gifts and talents forms in one way or another. It's part of our calling in life, right? It's part of it. It doesn't necessarily mean always that that is it. You're just fulfilling that role, but it becomes the fuller, more complete version of you, for sure. So tell us about artist Aaron, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's another channel or language to be able to express what your heart feels. It's something that I feel very fortunate that I have access to music and an ability to express myself. One of my favorite kind of heroes that I look up to, Mr. Rogers, he talks about growing up as a kid, not being able to express his feelings, and he would go to the piano and play his feelings out. And that's very much been my experience, is when you don't have access to the words that you need, or you haven't had an experience to be able to communicate to somebody else exactly how you feel, it becomes a different spectrum through which you can communicate. And I think art, in a very, very real way, it becomes therapeutic for people who have a high degree of feeling and who feel isolated from much of the world, because they receive so much information about their experience. What they think and what they feel about the world tends to be a broad spectrum that doesn't mesh with where most of the rest of the world tends to live and communicate. And so we have to kind of go and find these other tools to help us first understand ourselves, and then to learn how to be able to express to other people, sometimes not in words, but through other mediums.
Yes.
And so for me, I think that's been my understanding of the artist journey.
Art is a language that doesn't at all use words, right? In your case, it's music. In my case, it's a brush stroke, right? So I'm a fine artist. So when I paint, I put those emotions into paintings, into images. And both of those speak directly to the soul. The observer and the listener don't need to speak the same language in human terms to understand the meaning behind it. And I just want to honor, if I may, in this conversation, one of the greatest artists that has ever lived, and that is Leonardo da Vinci. It is his birthday, and it's recognized as an International Art Day today. And since we are recording this conversation on that day, and both of us don't believe in coincidences. I think this is a wonderful opportunity. And now, if you will, to elaborate a bit more about what you wanted to say and share.
That's such a cool I didn't realize that was the date today, and to consider. As you're talking, you said something that really spurred an idea for me that I've been thinking a lot about the last month or two. But you said something to the effect that art becomes a tool for us to help express where sometimes words doesn't help. What the way that I've been thinking about it, and this may not make a lot of sense for people who are literal, but for an artist, this might be helpful. If you imagine emotions as all being destinations. So if you imagine the landscape of the infinite, and all of the emotions are like different planets, different stars that you can go and visit, they all have their own infinite loop that you can traverse, that you can get stuck in. And it's easy to stay there if you don't have a vehicle to move from one emotion to the other. Well, the vehicle that best navigates the space of infinite things like emotions is time. Well, that's not super helpful if you need to move from one emotion to another. It's like you can just let time happen to you. What artists have a real gift in being able to do is to draw a map other people can follow that allow them to move from one emotion to another emotion. So if you're imagining like in the 3D aspect of reality, to move from one location to another requires movement. You have to create energy and move from one place to another. Like the movement is what allows you to navigate space. So movement is the vehicle. And so if you're moving in space, like the more you move, the more time you spend. So time will move you from one thing that is outside of time, which an emotion is like, if you're happy, you're just happy. There isn't a length or measurement of what that is. And so you can just let time pass and you'll slowly move out of the gravity of one emotion to whatever the next closest thing is. But artists are able to say, take you from one place and build a series of steps. They can draw a map that allows you to take the steps from one emotion to another. And so in a sense, you can draw a map that is more multi-dimensional than like a 3D map, which you represent in a lower dimension on 2 dimensions. So artists can draw like a 4-dimensional map that will move you from one emotion to another, which is why I love storytelling, which is why I love music. It's why I love looking at pictures and things that put you in an experience, because if you can successfully translate your experience for somebody, they can have a similar experience and be able to understand and empathize what you've done. And artists are one of the only people that are able to do that consistently for others. And it's something that many people don't understand fully, other than just, I feel something. But artists are truly the navigators. They're the cartographers of a much higher dimension of our existence.
Absolutely, because it is so uncharted there. Like the words don't have a glimpse of that. It is just your imagination is there, right? It's your imagination that is creating it. So your imagination takes you on that journey, as it does through our life, right? We create what we live, and we create it whether we are aware of it or not. So becoming aware of it and becoming deliberate in the way that you create is just the starting point on that wondrous journey of life. And if you are not yet at that gate, you should be focused to getting there. And art is a great way into it. It's a great portal to enter all of who you are. And let's face it, would you want to be here and not experience and explore all of who you are in every dimension that you can imagine? So yeah, that is the kind of language that we're talking about here. And it is difficult to put it into words, but on the other hand, there is no wrong expression, right? Because if this is something that you experience and see in your imagination, when you describe it, it sounds true to another. And that other part of self, the other person, can connect the dots for themselves, right?
Yeah, that, man, what you just said is something that I believe a lot. And I think the best art that is able to truly impact and move people is the art that successfully conveys some aspect of the truth. The more that you're able,
yes.
the more
it
that
is
you're
all
able
true,
to listen, the more that you're able, exactly.
Yes.
You know, there's so much to reality that there are so many perspectives and places you can stand that you can see some little sliver of what light and truth really is.
Yes.
And it's true from that perspective, but it's not true from where somebody else is standing. And unless you can give them a little bit of your experience, invite them in, create some intimacy, reveal part of what you've lived, sometimes through art, you can't build a bridge from where they are and to where you are, and they will struggle to understand you, and you'll struggle to communicate and resonate with them. And so artists are, you know, my last name is Weber. The etymology of that name is like the weavers, the people who tie things together. And that's what art does. It creates more connection between us, between the fibers of the universe, and creates a network through which we are able to travel and experience other parts of reality, other people's experience by that relationship that we craft through story, through time, through experience, through journeying through life together.
And it's absolutely wonderful when we find and describe to each other what we see. So we have two different views, and then we have that realization between us that we're describing the one and the same reality of all, right? And that, to me, there is no bigger magic than that all of these forms of expression in all the unique and individual ways always lead to that same place, so that we are never disconnected from each other. We are always part of one and the same, because we are one and the same. The fabric of our life, the very thing inside us that is alive, it's inseparable, it's like infinite, as you said. So, but it expresses itself very differently, that you see yourself as you, and I experience myself as me. But in these moments, we realized how one and the same we are, right? So I think entrepreneurs absolutely need to define themselves as artists, and define that for themselves and own it, because I think art equals freedom, equals life, equals all of these values that are, we arrived to this world with those values, right? It's just at some point we agree to let go of it, like as if it's not important to us. So, I mean, this conversation is just thrilling for my soul. It really is beautiful, and I'm sure that everyone listening can relate in their own way. I want to bring us back to your mission and to your project and to things that you are doing in this world that are so, again, in a beautiful way, they connect people together, right? So tell us about your like day-to-day activities, like what you're doing at the moment that really makes you passionate about what you do.
Well, here, this is a really wonderful question that illustrates like my heart as an artist. So I can describe the things that I do, which is just a small amount of data. So I'm currently helping building communities. My community business that I've run for about 4 years has primarily helped churches and schools grow and build more loving culture. The stage that I'm at right now is I'm helping entrepreneurs grow their audience and create community where people want to be. And so your prospects, your customers become promoters. And so you start to have an asset in your business that will just grow itself. That's what I'm really excited about helping people with. And so in building community, I mean, that just sounds like a set of tasks, or, building relationship and networking with people. I think to describe what I'm doing in a different way, I can use feelings and story to really tell you a little bit more what I'm about. And what you just mentioned about us all being the same is a huge value for me. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing. The place that I learned that was from my piano teacher. When I was beginning to learn to play the piano, I realized that music was something that allowed me to be creative. But I also noticed right away that when I would play music, people would pay attention to me. And so I started to learn very early that when I performed, I was accepted. And I started to equate music and performance and being in front of people as a way to be loved. And so as I learned to play music, I started to compose. I started to, I played, I struggled. I didn't realize that I had ADHD. I was diagnosed very late in my life, in my 30s. But I didn't really learn to read music very effectively. I would memorize the piece. I would play by ear, and then memorize the piece. And so what I found is that I enjoyed playing music by ear and improvising much more than sitting down and forcing myself to read music. So I started to get excited about composing, and it allowed me to just completely be free at the piano. And I eventually went on to start scoring my short films and that sort of thing. But the first piece of music that I wrote was a ragtime piece, and I played it for my music teacher, and she got excited for me. She said, this is actually very good, and I think that you should enter it in a music competition. So, internally, I am all of a sudden turned on and getting all this validation and feeling excited about the prospect of being in front of other people. And then at the same time, I'm afraid of being rejected, because as an artist, as somebody who feels very deeply, when you're beginning the artist journey, you put so much of yourself into your art, and it's easy to confuse your art and the things that you create with you. And in a very real way, it can be, but you also, the more you mature, you are able to separate like what is you and what is the product or the art that you make. I was very much at that stage where I was looking for validation. I was wanting to be loved and accepted. And so I went to this competition. It was a composition contest for all of the students of all of the music teachers in the state of Texas in the United States. And so I ended up going in. I was afraid of the performance. I had done recitals, so I wasn't afraid of being in front of people, but I didn't want to feel rejected. And so I I played my music, and I sat there the whole rest of the day, just hearing other people's works and just feeling like in a knot of like what's going to happen. And I ended up my music got selected as the best original work for my age bracket in the state of Texas. So I won an award for best original composition, and it was something that I really felt. I felt good. I felt validated. I felt like I was worth something to people. And I learned a very important lesson, because what happened after that is they invited me to come to the national competition to take that piece to a much broader stage. And it was a painful decision. I felt like I was being pulled in two directions. And what she did for me really changed my life. It really shifted the way that I thought. I told her that I wasn't going to go. And I thought, my validation seeking, my wanting to be accepted, like I thought I was going to disappoint her. And she told me, I'm so proud of you for standing up for what you believe in. I know that this is a great opportunity for you, but I want you to understand that I still love you. I still think that what you wrote is beautiful, and it's important that you act on the things that you believe. And she gave me a beautiful gift of accepting me as I am, allowing me to be the person that I was drawing a circle around the person that I wanted to be for people through my actions. We have our internal perspective, which is the things that we think and the things that we feel, which are entirely invisible to everybody else. And there's a whole aspect of us that sometimes we feel like we're two different people when our actions are out of alignment with those things. But when you make a decision that somebody can see, and they say, this is how I experience you, this is the you that I can see, and they accept you anyway, that's a huge thing. And so that experience really taught me that acceptance and love and validation, a lot of it truly comes from being able to see somebody in their experience and accept them as they are. And so that experience really formed and shaped the idea for me of what a fuller picture of love is. And so what you said about us all being the same, so much of life's experience is being willing to be with people, to be curious, to spend time with them. And we don't have to, we're limited, we're finite. We don't have to spend an enormous amount of times with people that we don't like, that we struggle to have a lot of in common with, because it's lots of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of testing, like what are the places that you have to go to navigate from where I am to where you are. But it's the journey of life that makes it worth it, is finding out how is it that you and that I are the same. And in places where it seems like there would be no connection, I haven't asked you yet where you grew up and like what your experience has been. I can detect that you have access to another language that I don't. You live in a different part of the world. Like we're meeting, it's very different times for us.
Indeed.
And yet we're able to find that we both have a passion for art, and we have found the experience of expressing ourselves enough that we feel confident to be able to go out and place ourselves in experiences with other people, to be vulnerable, so that we can build more connections with others, and finding out those shared values, those things that we feel about the things that we do. When you find values with somebody that is the same with you, it
instant connection,
knits your souls together. It creates connection in a way that allows you to value and love somebody the same way that you would love yourself. And
Yes,
so,
that's it. And
yeah.
it's beautiful. And I'm so glad you used that word. It's the recognition that that love is the same. And there are so many things on the surface that point to what differentiates us. But in this conversation, we went directly for the things that always are going to point that we are one and the same.
What I've realized is it's really your ability, your superpower to love people in a way that many people cannot. And so it's in that searching process, in that trying to fulfill, like, well, maybe this will make me happy, maybe this will help me feel understood. And so for me, I explored all kinds of different things. Music was one, magic was another. And so the reason I got into magic was because it was one of the things early in my life that I had a very deep and full experience. It wasn't just somebody saying, oh, you need to go learn this, and that's like one point of information. It was a full alignment of like what you are seeing, what you are hearing, what you are experiencing, what you're feeling. All of those things are stacked in a huge way where all of them are working towards the same goal of creating an experience for you. And so I remember really vividly being probably 6 when I it was back when we had, as little kids, we had a bedtime. It was probably like 6 or 7 in the evening. And so as a child who just had an overactive imagination, like I hated bedtime because it was so boring to me. And I remember my mom allowing me to stay up late. There was a TV show on, and it happened to be David Copperfield performing. David Copperfield is one of the greatest living magicians, I think, because he uses storytelling integrated into his performance so well, better than almost any magician that I understand, in terms of like the theatrical performance of telling story. And it was the first time I had ever seen magic. It was the first time I'd ever seen somebody do something that I thought was impossible. And the way that it made me feel was just so indescribable. And so it became something I was really interested in. I didn't know a lot about, but I was so curious. And so when I turned 7, I got a magic book for my birthday. And then I spent all of my free time trying to learn how to do magic tricks. And I had this dream to be a magician for a while. And so I did, right around the time I got into college. I think I was probably 17, right before I went to school. I really actively started pursuing being a magician. And so I'd been performing quite a bit since I was a teen. I started actively looking for gigs, and I got to do that for about a year. And it taught me a lot about just being able to keep going. In entrepreneurship, sometimes it's not clear what the path is, and you have to just keep trying. I was doing a show it was probably the biggest show that I can remember doing. It was at a big gymnastics performance. There was a whole bunch of acrobatic troops that came together, and we had this big show at this gym. And so I was the opening act. And so I'd prepared three illusions to do in front of, probably close to 100 people, families of the acrobats. And so it was one of the earlier performance when I was really professionally pursuing magic. And the big finish that I was trying to do, the trick required me to make sure that I had things lined up in a certain way. I had a part of the the trick where I had random guests from the audience write their name down, and then put it into a hat, and then randomly draw a name. The way that I was doing that, I needed a specific person to be my assistant, and so I was trying to create the appearance that it was random.
Right.
Well, I messed up as I'm doing this performance. The way that you force that person to be the assistant, like, I made a mistake, and so I actually created the possibility that I would end up getting an assistant that didn't know what they were supposed to do.
Right.
And so in the moment, I'm trying to figure out, how do I keep going and doing my rehearsed stuff and still figure out how to make this end up the way that I need it to end up. And for anybody who has any interest in magic, you know, a lot of the process of crafting a performance is creating the appearance of lots of choice, but really it happens the way that you would like it to be, or where there really is a little bit of choice, you have multiple ways to take what happens and bring it back to where you are in control of the situation.
Right.
And it very much mirrors the entrepreneur journey of you listen to what people need and to what people want, and there's an infinite amount of things that people are looking for. But if you can hear the common thread behind what people are looking for and help them realize what you do and how it could help them, many times people don't care what it is that solves their problem. They just need somebody to pay attention and care enough about them that somebody that they trust offers them a solution. And so, you know, it's a great illustration of the value of persistence, of just being willing to keep trying to figure out, how do I get from where I am now, which is a problem, to finding a solution. And it you know, it worked out in my magic show, and nobody knew that there was a mistake, and you know, I was sweating bullets, but like it turned out good. And that's where I am in my life. It's like, you know, it sometimes the journey of entrepreneurship can feel like your life is burning down around your ears and everything is going wrong, and you have to have the commitment to say, I'm going to just keep moving forward until I can see from my path. Like, I can't see it from here, but if I keep climbing up this hill, even though it's painful and it hurts, I'll be able to see eventually where I need to go next. And especially for entrepreneurs who are artists, who are building a business as an extension of themselves, as a way to understand themselves, as a way to create something of impact that means something to themselves and others. If you look at your business as a piece of art, it's so important to weather the pain, to go through the experience. The more you try to push it away, the more that you remove a very special part of life that only you have access to. Artists have the ability to translate what pain means into something really valuable and important for the rest of society that they cannot do on their own. And so that's why we see poetry lasting for hundreds and hundreds of years. It's why we have music that was written centuries ago that we still use, because it speaks to us in a way that is so true that it transcends language, it transcends time, it transcends culture. And for somebody who is an artist, who has the gift of being able to translate and transmute pain into, this is what it means, this is what it's telling me, this is what it teaches us as humanity. It's very important for you to be willing to accept and go through the experience that sometimes sucks, sometimes feels like suffering, because you, out of everybody else in the world, you're the only one who can take your experience and say, all right, I felt this, let me help somebody else feel it. They don't have to go through the experience that I went through. I can let people understand what I have come out of this knowing without them having to go through that degree of suffering.
Yes.
And artists have a gift that they're able to shoulder stand it in a way that the rest of the world doesn't. And so if I could encourage any entrepreneurs and artists that are listening at this moment, it's if you're in the place where you're doing something hard, find a way to go through it. Find what you need to survive it. And for me, that's been community, having people and real relationships around me that accept me no matter what, that I can tell them the darkest, like, this is the stuff I'm in. This is why I'm so upset and like I'm spread across different things.
Right.
Having places where you can be real and intimate and authentic about what you're going through, it allows you to begin to process and acknowledge and accept that is a part of your reality. And it isn't until that we embrace that and allow it to be part of us, sometimes through talking about it and processing it, sometimes through creating art about it, and sometimes it's just time. Just go through it long enough until you're at a different stage of experience. But I encourage you, stick with it. Like, be in it. Being that you go through is something nobody else will get to experience but you. And if all what you've learned from it, you can do that in a way that very few people in this world can. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're looking to make impact, that is the greatest gift that you can give the world, is sharing your perspective, because nobody else will have yours.
Very well said. And I love the story and how well it illustrates your point that as entrepreneurs, that is exactly what we do. I like to see a whole of life as art and as entrepreneurship. To me, like it just really correlates so well with the, as we said, these basic values that we're already born with. So we're already made up of this stuff, right? So we just have to be willing to go through that journey rather than negate ourselves, inside ourselves, this desire to become more, to explore more, to experience more, even if it's difficult, knowing that that is the only way forward. We don't go through life and here comes obstacle and we say, oh, I don't want to go any further, and you retreat and go back. Like, that's not how life works, right? But yet a lot of us are attempting to go about life exactly that way. So in this conversation, we're encouraging our dear viewers to think outside the box, right? To imagine just for a day, what if I am the great artist? What if I am an entrepreneur? How would my life look today if I behave like I'm going to solve a problem? Whether it's your own problem or challenge, right? Because the challenge is a gift, really. Do you agree with that, Aaron? Because inside those challenges are our biggest lessons. And on the other side of that challenge is the bigger, better version of ourselves. So how can we then not like that problem when it is part of life, right? We weren't promised life without problems. That is not the point. Nor is the point to know the whole journey, because we can't. We may, even if we have the power in this moment to see how the rest of our journey will unfold, tomorrow we grow into a better version of ourselves. We have another conversation like this, and you and I have another conversation in 2 days. I mean, I'm not feeling the same person that started this conversation. Do you?
No, and that, I think, to me, it's the power of connection with others. Is it transforms you. Yes. I mean, love is one of those things that the nature of it changes what's around it. And I think that's part of the reason I value connection with others so highly, is because it makes you different in a way that you cannot be by yourself. And
Yes.
so I constantly place myself in that experience to allow others to change me, and to invite other people to share my experience. So being with other people is one of the highest values that I've come to in this stage of my life. Now I value and treasure it so much, because it's in the presence of other people that we are changed. When you experience love from somebody, it makes you more like them. And so I put myself in the experience of being with other people so that I can become something I couldn't on my own. And it's why I try my best to share my perspective and what it's like to be me, so that whatever part of my experience can help other people, allow them to see a little bit more of what it's like to be me.
Very lovely. I think our best contribution is our willingness to stay open and to show up. And when we do that, we allow the magic of the highest self, of our creator, to flow the real magic of life through us. And we get to experience this together. But if we are not willing to show up, if we are thinking, I need to be perfect, I need to impress somebody, I need to do this, we disconnect ourselves from the source of power that is ever available to us. If we just remain willing to play, just willing to have a go, just willing to show up, right? The rewards are immense. And one of those rewards has been this conversation here with you. I'm so grateful, and I hope that this one is just one of many that we will have, Aaron.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a pleasure, Katerina, and I just thank you so much for spending some of your time with me, and for inviting me to share some of my experience here with your viewers.
It has been an absolute pleasure.